Call me successful.
So, ladies and gentlemen, we've got a very special guest for you today. Speaker, coach, trainer, Josh Phegan. Josh, welcome to the podcast.
Avi, lovely to be here with you.
Now, I want to start with this question. How did you get into real estate?
My story is a pretty simple one. I am born into a family that did real estate, and my dad's got about 8 or 9 brothers and sisters that were all involved in real estate at the same time. My grandfather started a real estate practice in a small regional area in Australia called Albury-Wodonga back in 1973. That was called Phegan Real Estate. Naturally, by the time I was born, my dad had already moved out of being a tradie into actually being a real estate agent. And naturally, it was just a natural course. Every Saturday, I thought that all you did was go to open houses. I didn't know that you could go to school sports and things on that. And so from that point of view, you were just always around it. And I actually went, I did a corporate accounting degree. I worked in the newspaper industry for my first 3 years of my career after finishing school, did my accounting degree, and then did a bit of DJing and ran a few nightclubs and did some things with go-karts and all sorts of stuff. And then one day, Dad rang up and said, "Oh, do you want to come and write a standards manual for the business?" And so we actually had the first iOS standards in terms of what we're doing for the business, and we made all that happen. And then I stayed for 4 or 5 years, auctioning and being a sales agent and doing all of those great things, and then moved over to becoming a real estate trainer. But yeah, it's a long time ago now. Like, I think that in the training space, I'm hitting our 18th, if not even into our 19th year as we record today.
Yeah, well, there's a lot to unpack there.
Yes.
I want to talk about the DJ stuff as well, so I'm going to get back to that. But so it's in your pedigree, like
Yes.
you grew up with it.
Mm-hmm.
And did you think that this is what you're going to end up doing, real estate, or was this when you studied accountancy, you were like, I'm going to be an accountant?
No, what I always wanted to do is that, like, I had a fascination, like, there was Microsoft had a program out called Paint.
Right.
And I used to, as a small child, draw buildings, and I would specialize in removing logos and adding a new logo. So a business would go bankrupt, would be liquidated, a new business would come in, they'd paint the shop front, they'd do all of those things. I used to love drawing that all the time, and it was unbelievable because my nature was always entrepreneurial. And what I actually wanted to be was an administrator, a liquidator, and a receiver.
Right.
So I wanted to be
Okay.
the sort of guy that, like, literally when a business goes into administration or liquidation or receivership, that you would go back in, take those assets, reform the assets, and bring those assets to be a highly successful business again. So I really enjoy, the challenges that come with business, identifying the different segments of what you need to do to make it highly successful, whether or not that's, lead generation, collecting of cash, delivery of service mechanisms, understanding, geographical expansion, and understanding how you got to do all of those things. And that was really where the fascination was. And the best thing about real estate is that it is so entrepreneurial in its nature. In it, there's a ton of freedom, but it also brings with it a ton of responsibility.
So the newspaper game, like, why did you get into that industry? Because a lot of real estate agents and trainers have been through that path.
Yeah, so the interesting conversation, I was very, very lucky. I think I was nearly probably one of the last people to come through the newspaper industry whilst it was still absolutely thriving. And this is well before digital had turned up. And what I had worked out is that I wanted to go and do valuation. And I went down to RMIT down in Melbourne. And there was a lot of people in that room, and they said, like, look around, only one in, every 10 or 20 people, whatever it is actually going to get into the course. And I went back, and my careers advisor said to me, well, good luck, because you're not going to get the marks that are required to get into university. So you need to start thinking about doing something else. And so I was like, okay. And Dad took me up to the local TAFE, and he said, hey, this is where you're going to end up if you don't start doing a little bit of extra study. And so I thought, okay, great. So I started to learn and to study a little bit extra. And I thought, well, if I'm not going to get into uni, I might as well create my own opportunity. And I had seen 4-page advertisements in the newspaper for the Australian Army for cadetships. And the cadetship was they would pay for your university, you would then get a job in the Army, and in 4 years' time, you'd come out with a degree and be in that. And I was like, I really like the concept, but I just don't want to be in the Army. So how could I apply that? So I went down to the local Albury-Wodonga Development Corporation and the Chamber of Commerce, and I asked them for a list of every organisation in town that had over 50 employees.
So the town was big enough to have a TAFE and a chamber of
Yes,
commerce.
that's true.
Yes.
Yeah. And so it's quite progressive. And the interesting thing is that I worked out, I'm going to ring these people, I'm going to pitch the idea. So back then it was Norski Skog, who is, they made all the newspaper. There was the Border Mail, which was actually the newspaper itself. There was a local car dealer who was at that level. And also too, there was CAT, the big machinery company. And so I literally got on the phone as a young 16, maybe 17-year-old at that point, knowing that I was coming to finish year 12. I finished quite young, and I picked up the phone and rang and said, look, I want to talk to someone. I'm in a position that I'd love to stay in the regions. I'd love to be not the brain drain, which was happening from regional Australia, is getting sucked into the city environments. I want to see whether or not you could create a job for me, and I would work for you for a contracted period well after my university degree, and hopefully forever if we do the right thing, but I'd like you to pay for my university. And so I remember that, and and out of those, there was a guy named Tony Whiting, who was the CEO of the Border Mail, and he said to me, well, I want you to come and meet with me and have a conversation. And I remember I borrowed mum's car at the time, and I dressed up and I put on dad's special aftershave, and, I drove in there to hand over the actual resume to the receptionist, and that was it. And no one else saw me who was important in that day, and but I was really lovely and, tried to do all of the right things. And Tony rang and said, look, it's a really good idea. We wish you all the best of luck. We're now going to advertise it. And they put it as full page ads in the newspaper for what felt like weeks. And at the end of that, Tony rang me and said, hey, you now get invited into the interview. That interview went for what felt like 3 or 4 hours. Probably wasn't. It was probably only an hour. But at that age, it felt, very full on to be sitting in front of a CEO of a very significant organization that printed a lot of the free regional newspapers, a lot of the metro regional newspapers, and as well as the biggest independent newspaper of the day. They had their own offset printing press. And they said to me, look, we want you to come and interview. And Tony said to me, well, do you want to do it? I said, well, Tony, to be honest, I'm in a difficult position because tomorrow I'll find out my year 12 marks and whether or not I'm going to get in to go and do valuation in Melbourne. And if that's the case, I would probably do the valuation course. And he said to me, well, this is the big thing in life. Sometimes you just got to make a decision. So he said, I'm going to leave you for 15 minutes. If you need to pick up the phone, you can dial 0 and that will get you to an outside line. You can ring anyone you need to if you need to have a chat with your dad or your mum, but you've got 15 minutes to make the decision. And if you don't accept, it's off the table. And he left. And I remember sort of just sitting there and I just thought, I'm better for the bird in the hand than the bird in the bush, I think is the old school saying. So I thought, I'm just going to do it. And so Tony came back in. He said, what do you think? I said, yep, I'm in. And the next morning, the Chancellor for RMIT rang me and said, we've made a special phone call because we really liked you in your interview and congratulations, you've got into RMIT.
Yeah, wow.
But I'd already made the decision to go with Tony and I was a man of my word. And so I said, thanks very much to RMIT for the opportunity. And you could defer in those days. So I deferred that course. And I went and did a Bachelor of Business and Accounting at Charles Sturt Uni in Albury. And then I got the opportunity to be able to work at the newspaper full time.
So Albury had a university as well.
Yeah, we did. Yeah, it's amazing.
Yeah.
And the interesting thing about that was that in working in the newspaper, my first job is that I had to do, and Tony was so entrepreneurial in that he said to me, I want you to do every job in the business for a day.
I love
So that was my first year. So I've been on the printing press. I've been out in the trucks. I've been in the newspaper editorial team writing the headline. I've had to choose the photo. I took the photo for the front page. I was in a position I had to take, people ringing in to put in a death classified. I've been in the position that I've had to work in digital classifieds. I've had to call my uncles for non-payment of a bill. I've had to be in a position, I've been in accounts. I've worked through circulation, distribution, marketing, designing ads, creating ads, like all of the production stuff that really went on back in those days. And there are plenty of things of that that's now digital in how that stuff is done. So I probably got to see the last of an incredible generation. And newspaper people were very much community orientated. And the other key thing is that literally the entrepreneurial skills that I learned in pagination, bringing together a newspaper, writing, editorial, it wasn't then, but production of podcast, video content, a stage show, a keynote, a lot of that came from the foundations of having to put a newspaper together. And so I'm forever grateful for the opportunity that created that. And in working with Tony, I got the chance to, within the first couple of days, that one of the ladies that he put me next to was a lady by the name of Kylie Duray. And Kylie was there to, look after me from time to time, but she was going on maternity leave and I was going to do functions of her role, small functions, but functions of her role in circulation. And 25 years later, Kylie and I are still working today. And she runs the Josh Phegan business, and we have an incredible relationship and probably one of the most unique working relationships that I've ever seen. And very, very blessed to have her in my world and in my life. But to have someone that you have spent so much time with that can complete sentences and we just both came from that old school, and we're very clear to work out who we want to work with, and understanding the core values and making sure that literally we do the right thing, and that we don't end up on the front page of the newspaper for all the wrong reasons, you know? So that's how that really started.
Well, what apprenticeship, like to start off in that industry and the
Mhm.
way you started, what led you to leave the newspaper industry?
So I was on a 3-year cadetship role. So that was going through to the end of my university degree. An enterprise bargaining agreement had happened at the time, and everyone got a natural pay rise. And obviously I was casual as opposed to permanent, even though I was doing 40 hours a week. And so there's a difference in the casual rates versus the permanent rate.
Right.
And so naturally, they had put me into the accounting stream by the time I got to year 3. And I remember looking across, and Mick Roble was the accountant next to me, and I was really fascinated with cars, you know, because in the country we had a brand out there called Holden, and like I really wanted to drive like a HSV, or maybe, for example, a Statesman. And I said to him, "How long does it take before you can drive a Statesman?" And he said, "Oh, look, if you do everything right, it's probably 15 years." I thought, 15 years? Mate, I could go down to Pickles, buy a secondhand one for like 30 grand. Man, I'm not sticking around for that. And I was like coding everything into the GST account 0829. And I said, "Is this what we do every day?" And he goes, "Yeah." So mate, not for me. And I went in and I got a job offer to stay full-time, and it was with a different person as opposed to Tony, who was the head financial guy at the time. And he gave me a job offer, and the job offer was an extra 35 cents a week.
Yeah,
And I went home and I was like raging with anger about how this could actually happen. And I thought, you know, I've got to change this. So I thought, okay, great. What am I going to do? And I spoke to a phenomenal guy by the name of Jonah Nader, who had a book called How to Win Friends and Infuriate People. How to Lose Friends, I should say, and Infuriate People. And how he had a book called How to Lose Friends and Infuriate Your Boss. And I rang him and he said, the best thing that you can do is make the decision to leave, but deliver the best 6 weeks of your life's work. And so I went in there and I worked super hard. And I got a fair few conversations of some headaches that then moved into some very debilitating conversations of, I forget what that's called now, but like literally you just couldn't see. And I definitely had that. And I was like, I need to leave. And so I exited the newspaper game. And it was a hard decision at the time. And a good mate of mine was running the rock and roll circus here in Brisbane, and the Valley Festival was on, and he asked me to come there, and I helped him in that performance. And then my dad rang me one day and he said, look, I got a spare ticket to this conference. Do you want to go? I'm like, oh yeah. He goes, look, it's in Sydney. You should go. And I went to the Australasian Real Estate Conference for the first time.
That's Eric.
Now.
Was
Yeah.
in Sydney.
Eric is in Sydney. And I went there and I got to see Tom O'Toole speak and some of the greats that had come out. And I just thought, you know what, I like this. And then when I got back, Dad said, oh, do you want to come into the office for a bit and write these manuals for being ISO 9001? I said, yeah, okay, great. I'll start that. And that's how that began. But I think that like the foundational piece is that I met some wonderful people that were very much community orientated, that taught me a lot about the core values. And in a small community, you do the wrong thing, everyone in town knows. In a city, you can vanish. But like it was a really important foundational piece, and I had a lot of great opportunities. Yeah.
So when you get to your dad's business,
Mhm.
you run the ISO
Yeah.
9001. Back
Yeah.
then, is it still 9001 now?
It's one
Yeah.
of the standards.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's like the standards you have on the back of a helmet. It basically means that every 4 weeks your business is audited by an independent auditor to make sure that you're delivering to standard, that you're reducing any variation, and that you've got a series of forms, checklists, visuals, and dialogues that operate inside of the business that are used by everyone. And it's a phenomenally high standard. And we were the only estate agency that had ever got to that level of accreditation. We had thought that if you put that on a signboard, that would lead to listings. Turns out that's not the case, but the sales process that it should have engineered should lead to listings. But I learned a ton through that. And then I got lucky and I got the chance. I met a guy by the name of John Mitchell at the Real Estate Institute of Victoria. He was their membership liaison, and John was very encouraging. I spent much time with him on the phone, and he said to me I should go and learn how to be an auctioneer. And in 2004, I went to the Novice Auctioneering Championships and I won that in Victoria.
See, I didn't know that about you. I didn't know you were an auctioneer.
Yeah. So that
wow.
was a big part of my life. And then I went to Tasmania for a Victoria versus Tasmania State of Origin of auctioneering. And then in 2006, I went to the Australasian Auctioneering Championships. And I had the chance to work with Chris Maud there. That year, Scott Kennedy Green won it. Phil Harris was involved in that. Damien Cooley was involved in that. And Damo rang me and said after that, mate, you should come and run auctions for us in Sydney. I said, oh, mate, I'd only fly in on Saturday morning. I'd fly out Saturday afternoon. I just didn't have the concept of moving to Sydney ever. And naturally, I never called auctions. Damo said, why don't you open a training business, call it Cooley Training. Love the enthusiasm, Damo, but if I'm going to do something, it would be on my own. And so I made the decision that I was going to do that at some point, and Dad had made the decision. He'd got to 55 and he'd decided that he wanted to sell the business. And I was too young. I thought, I've got to go see the world and go and do some different things. So we sold the rent roll, and then we ended up selling the sales business. And I made the decision to go off and to go and do something on my own. And my mum was horrified because I said, Mum, I want this job where I never have to sleep in the same bed for more than 2 nights in a row. And my mum is like, what sort of professions is that? And anyway, so somehow that has now happened. And you look back and you think, wow, you've had a lot of great opportunities.
So in that process, did you sell? Did you?
Oh, yeah. Listing and selling. Dad and I worked as a team, which was 80, 90, 100 transactions a year for us. It was a very, very potent business. We had a lot of opportunity. We sold in Wodonga, which was the Victorian side. And then we wanted to go and sell into the Albury side. I went down to the local La Piquetta pizza restaurant. I said to them, hey, what do you pay for your rates? They said $2,500 a year. I said, great, I'll have your window for $2,500. And they let me put in my window display. And it was so funny because I would actually go in there and I was so proud of it. I'd go in, I'd change the window display every couple of days. I'd move things around. I'd take out listings. I'd put an older sold one in. I'd remove another listing. I'd put another one in. I'd change the prices. And what would actually happen is I'd do that most nights. And one day, Danny, who owned the pizza restaurant, rang down. He said, Josh, I need you to come. You got to come and meet Mick. I'm like, what do I mean? I'm going to bed, Danny. He goes, no, you're not. You're coming down. You got to meet Mick. I'm like, what do I mean I got to meet Mick? He's going to go and be a guest of Her Majesty. What do you mean a guest of Her Majesty? Mick's going to jail. You need to come and sell the house. And I went down and I signed up the listing. I went back the next day and re-signed the listing because I thought Mick might have had maybe one or too many vodkas that night. And literally, I then had this unbelievable referral network because once you deal with one Italian, you get many.
You get all of them.
And so and it was a phenomenal capability. And we just became massive networkers and great relationship orientated. And I worked the restaurants, I worked the conversations at the nightclubs, I worked people that I could meet. I didn't DJ much in the nightclubs. We actually owned a lot of the equipment and we leased out the equipment. Most of my mates did the late night shifts, but I would go in and take the photos of everyone that was in the nightclub. And that was way before Facebook. And we used to have like a big image that people used to have out the front of the nightclub. And we used to take all the photos for that. It's fascinating. Some of the things we've done.
Seems like all relationship based prospecting.
100% relationship.
It was no Dollar Knox, cold calls, all the stuff.
Very systemized.
Very community.
Very much community based, but not at a school fair or a school fete, but like literally learning how to be with the people who were already around you. And I always had this basic belief, like provide value first, invoice second. And if you can learn how to be highly valuable, you'll be in high demand. And the number one job is don't worry about your competitors, focus 100% about the customers. And so my orientation has always been to think that way. Yeah.
Yeah. So it's interesting because not a lot of people know that you used to sell like that before. People haven't heard that story.
I actually had a guy ring me once. He wanted to put a negative review on Google because he couldn't find any details on the major real estate portals about me being an agent in the past. I'm like, mate, well, back then there was only one portal at the time. And all of that history got deleted. Like it never happened. Like it's kind of funny. Like when you disappear from the digital world. But I can definitely show you. I had a fantastic client of mine who I did a transaction for in maybe 2000. She rang me yesterday, Judy Walsh, and I did maybe 14 or 15 transactions for her. So the fact that we still talk to each other 25 years after the first deal, there's a pretty fascinating capability, even though we don't have anything necessarily on the day-to-day, a reason to transact in my current world. Yeah.
So I want to talk about the coaching bit because you're known as one of the best coaches in Australia, if not the best. But it's not, you're not the coach, you're the benchmark of coaches, right? Like going back from those days to now, like how have you stayed so relevant in the market? Because I feel like a lot of coaches are just the fundamentals are the same, but the way they teach it hasn't changed. They're kind of like, it's not the quality of delivery, it's just something that doesn't resonate with people, right? Like coaches come and coaches go, like agents. So what is it that sets you apart from everyone else out there?
So I, respectfully, I'm aware that there are people that work in the industry, and there are some people that do what I go to call CPD based training, and then there are other people that are in a position that they go to train for profit improvement, advancement, delivery mechanisms outside of what the licensing requirements are. And I decided I wouldn't do CPD and licensing because it's a low margin business. It's a commodity based business. it doesn't there are different rules and regulations that you need to follow. So there's not a lot of variation. And before I'd come along, I think that a lot of people had probably changed coaches or speakers every 18 months. Oh, we need someone new. We need something fresh. And I'd watched The Godfather. And I just thought, I don't need a lot of customers. What I need is 1 or 2 customers that have got a lot of problems.
I thought you were going to give me a Godfather quote.
No.
Can offer, you can't refuse.
No. But Michael was kind of interesting because the conciliary to The Godfather is like literally said that I don't need a lot of customers. I just need 1 or 2 that have got a lot of problems. So I sat down with some CEOs and I said to them, hey, I'm going to start a coaching practice. I want to be really good at what I do. I want the opportunity that if I'm good enough, I get the right of a reply and a return next year. And I'm going to only enter in under the proviso that we're going to work together for a decade at a minimum. And a few people were like, what? I'm like, yeah, because there's got to be foundations. And so what I learned really clearly was about modularization. There's key parts of a real estate practice, prospecting, listing, negotiation, but also too about learning how to be highly relevant. And I think that there was no school to go to on how to be a coach. There was no one as a benchmark that you would follow. There was no Alexander Phillips in the sales world to be that, or an Avi Khan when it comes to running businesses, So I was like, okay, great. I've got to go and learn this myself. And so every single thing that I've done has been through trial and tribulation, through testing, through making a decision to make sure that you're at your best. But I would say education, constantly growing, constantly reading, constantly developing, constantly seeing the best in the world and bringing that back to that environment is a really phenomenally important part of becoming really good at what you do. I don't focus at all on the competitor set. I focus 100% on my customers, and I'm absolutely fiercely loyal to my customer base as well.
What was the moment, Josh, where you said to yourself, I think I can do this? Like the coaching is working. People
I'm not sure it was the moment that you say you think you can do it. Like I remember driving through the car wash and it was like, I have about a week's worth of cash in the account before I'm not going to be able to meet the mortgage repayments. And so I was like, okay, great. I better choose a profession. And don't think that was set. Like I didn't sit down and have any of the level of design, structure, thinking that I have today. I wish I had me now back 18 years ago. But I remember, and still in the industry today, a guy by the name of George Sava. And I remember I thought, I know George, I'll ring him and I'll ask him. And I said, hey, George, I'm Australia's most exclusive underground real estate coach. I'd love the opportunity to be able to work with you.
Most inclusive.
No, reclusive, exclusive real estate coach. You've probably never ever heard of me. I've heard that you're one of the best agents in the country and I want the right to work with you. And he said, okay, great. And I told him the price point. He said, no problems. Do you take Amex? And I said, I do now. And I went and got my Amex application filled in and became an Amex merchant overnight. And then one thing led to another. And I never wanted to kind of move from actually coaching beyond being over the phone. And then I had a phenomenal guy by the name of Jared Gray at Dickens. Jared and I had worked together in that I'd coached him a bit to be an auctioneer through the novice auctioneer competition. And he's in a beautiful place called Bright. I actually go to Bright every year. It's a beautiful part of the world at the foothills of Falls Creek and Mount Hotham. And Jared rang me one day and he said, I want you to come and do a half-day session with our team. And I said, Jared, I don't do that. He goes, well, yeah, you do. I said, no, I don't. I said, I only do coaching over the phone for 30 minutes. He's like, okay, give me a BSB account number. And I turned up the next morning and there's a whole heap of money in the account. And I rang Jared. I said, well, you've bought certainly a lot of phone coaching. He said, no, I haven't. He said, I'll see you in the office on Friday. And I'm looking forward to the prospecting manual. And don't forget to bring it. I said, what manual? He said, the manual you'll have by Friday. And he hung up. And I thought, shit, I haven't written a manual. I guess it's just like a newspaper. So I'll just write a manual.
I know how to paginate.
And so I know how to paginate. I know how to design things. And so I did. And I remember I rang up one of my best mates and his girlfriend was hot. So that obviously made sense that she was going to be a good proofreader. So I got her to come over and she did the proofreading and like, that's how that happened. And like, it was awesome. And we went and we did that and we did the first one and Jared said, oh, look, that was awesome, mate. He goes, look forward to seeing you next week on listing. Don't forget the manual. I said, what manual for listing?
It's client driven then.
Like, so it was absolutely client driven. And so like, literally I got very, very lucky and I still call Jared a very dear friend today. And, you know, one thing led to another and I met one person who met one person who met one person who met one person. And I was really nice to a lady who was on the front reception at a particular client and she left and she ended up going to a franchise group. And then that franchise group ended up buying 50 event dates off me the next year. Yeah. That was all because I was nice to the receptionist, not because I was hunting after the CEO. And then one thing led to the next, to the next, to the next. And I think that outside of COVID, our business has been super consistent. We've never had bad years or good years. We just have great years, but absolutely through hard work and by design. Yeah.
So you coach a lot of these high performers, right? They're not even top 1%, they're top 0.05% of Australia. Like, why is it that they're so successful, and what advice do you provide them? Like,
So I would say to you that, like, you learn more, not by coaching the best. You learn a lot by coaching the people that are just starting. And I work a lot more with business owners, salespeople, property managers now, like in BDM space. I work in commercial, work in residential. I work in sort of, prop tech, prop side, as those conversations. We work in Dubai, we work in New Zealand, we work in the UK and in Australia. And what's the common trait behind the people that really do well is that literally they have a high level of structure and a very clear level of discipline. And Gilbert and Arca talks a lot about that, about like understanding like what really gets people. And if you think about it, the first one without a doubt is the pressure of expectation. So if you go and get $1 million home loan, you need to have $6,000 in the bank account at the end of the month. You're going to have to find a way how to do that. There's the pressure of then being in a position of people looking at you through scrutiny. The Australasian Auctioneering Championships was that, learning how to auction and then having your peers tell you if you were good. And then later on, now I get people to do their listing presentation to me and I show them how they can improve. And then the next one does it, then the pressure of consequence. We all learn that through auction day. If you don't do your calls and get the buyers there and get an offer, you don't sell. And the foundational idea is that literally I learn about the power of deadlines through newspapers. So everything converged. So when you think about people that are highly successful, they'll have the pressure of consequence, the pressure of expectation, and most likely that pressure of expectation that is either applied to them or by them. And that's the uniqueness in the formula.
And then how do you bring that out?
Well, you find out what people want. So, my dad would always say that a lot of people are not committed until they get something on the earth that really means something to them. Sometimes you're lucky enough, you meet an amazing partner. Sometimes you get to have a child. Sometimes if you're lucky, you get to have a business. Sometimes you really love doing what you do. Sometimes you're in a position that you get some debt, you get some commitment. But like, it's one of those things. And people shy away from that. They're not for the industry, because the industry requires you to be able to adapt and to be able to absorb substantial amounts of pressure and to be incredible at it.
So speaking of the industry, so we're seeing the advent of AI, automation. There's 500 CRMs out there. Do you think the fundamentals of real estate are changing, or is it becoming more crucial?
The foundation is absolutely exactly the same as it always has been. The one thing that is universal is that great customer service transcends all market conditions. The one thing that is universal is that the sales team always blames the marketing when they're not going well and always thinks that they're awesome when they're going well. And so what you realize, tech comes and goes. What it's supposed to do is far overstated compared to what it does until it catches up. And I think that the foundational piece here is that when markets go bad, and if you go and see New Zealand over the course of the last year to 2 years, it's been a very challenging market. It's been the exact opposite of Dubai, which has been phenomenal. Victoria, tough market. Queensland, relatively good. Brisbane, Gold Coast, booming. And Sydney, relatively good. What you see foundationally is that relationships are the thing that empower all. And it's the vitamin connect. Your ability to be able to connect with people and to care and to demonstrate that is a really important part. And I'm very lucky. My dad still practices real estate today. He retired at 55. He got back in at 60. And, dad in his early 70s now does lots of great transactions. And it's phenomenal because it's purpose. And I always say to people, find your purpose center. Well, what do you mean by that? Okay, well, go to the photo section on your phone. Tell me what you take photos of. If you take photos of classic cars or baking or your family, or great experiences or vistas or views or mountain bikes, that's your energy. Do more of that. And I think that for a lot of people, they haven't lent into making a decision that they want to become one of the best in the world. And I was very lucky. I got to listen to the Zig Ziglars, Brian Tracy's, Jim Rohan's, in the formation of my life as a 5 or 6 year old. I think most people were probably watching Bluey, but that's what I was listening to with dad in the car on the cassette tape. And I think that that was a formation thing, because dad had taught me that you can be anything you want in life if you just help enough people get what they want. And you can be anything you want in life if you just spend the time to actually grow your skill set and be prepared to put yourself out and be vulnerable. And I think that like that's probably something that has probably stayed with me for a very long period of time.
You also talk a lot about courage
Mm-hmm.
in what you've delivered and in your content before.
Mm-hmm.
Do you think that's lacking nowadays?
If you don't
just-
ask, you don't get. And like I'm going to say, you live in a society where people put up a photo, and if it doesn't get a certain number of likes or comments, they'll delete it and put up another photo that's slightly more revealing. The whole problem with that, though, is that there are significant issues of dealing with rejection. You need to become phenomenal at rejection. Now, that doesn't mean be silly in sales process. Like there's a difference between understanding what you do. But when someone rejects you, how you respond to that tells me a lot about who you are as a person. I remember I went for a listing that I thought that I definitely should have the opportunity to win this. And, like it's a person I know well. We build a relationship over time. This should be something that we should land. Anyway, long story short, I pushed super hard. We did the listing preso. I thought that it was the listing presentation of my life. And I walked out, and the next day she rang me and she said, "Hey, I just want to let you know we've gone with someone else." And I was like heartbroken. And I was like, "Oh, okay." And I kind of put down the phone and I was like, "Well, what do you do now?" And Dad said you write a thank you card. So I pulled out a thank you card with a pen and I wrote the thank you card. And I was like, "Dear Karen, thank you so much for the opportunity to be able to come and see about the potential sale of your property. I know it's always difficult in selecting an agent. I understand that you've made that choice. I'm thrilled for you and I wish you a really successful sale. But if ever I can ever do anything for you in the future in buying or selling, let's not make it awkward. More than happy to chat. Regards, Josh." Put an X on it, phone number. And I dropped into a letterbox. And she rings up the next day. Goes, "Yeah, I just want to let you know, sold for 200 grand more than what you told me." I was like, "Wow." Sold in a day. I was like, "Wow." She goes, "The agent was great, but my best friend Becca around the corner wants to sell a house. It's worth this amount. Go and list it." And I went and listed it. It was the best listing of my career. And I just think that like that's the foundational piece of learning to be triumphant in defeat, that you're either here for a lesson or you're in a position that you're here for victory. And either one are going to be just as good. And you actually learn more from losing than you do from winning. So lean into learning how to lose, but lose well. But actually get good coaching, get good mentoring, work with your principal, work with your sales manager, work with your head of property management to see where the areas for improvement can be so then you can become a better person.
Now, I just want to change tact a little bit
Yeah.
and talk about, because you mentioned Dubai,
Yeah.
like this thing of, sleeping at home for 2 nights in a row, then
Yes.
moving. It really drives you, right? Like you're one of probably the coach that travels the most, right?
Mhm.
But how do you stay grounded doing that? Like, is it just a passion that you love? Do you see Josh like owning a franchise one day or owning Josh Phegan real estate?
No,
Or
no,
like what makes you do that? Like what's the drive behind
The
that?
foundational idea is that like I've helped some people through some pretty difficult circumstances, and a lot of what a real estate coach never gets public. I've helped people through some very difficult personal circumstances, some, things that are police matters of significance and court matters. And the reality of it is that I've helped them to get through that. I've also helped people to be wildly successful and build a business and exit a business. And when you go through all of those things, mate, I love the moment that the light turns on. I love working with the 18-year-old with no confidence that gets their first listing and makes their first sale. I love working with the 65-year-old business owner that sells their business, stays on in the business, and goes on to be wildly successful as a salesperson. I love working with that person in leasing and helping them to become a phenomenal property manager and later on a director and owner of a business. And so I want to be there for all stages of someone's career, whether or not they're entering or exiting, and helping them to do it and to do it seriously well.
That's your why. Helping people.
Well, if you think about that, never stop improving.
Yeah.
Like if you think about that, the purpose statement inside of our business is that I just want to see growth. I want to see growth for everyone. And I want to help people to be wildly successful and to allow them to experience the things that life can offer when you make the decision to not blame anyone else but yourself for your current circumstance.
It's amazing. I've got 2 questions before you go.
Yeah, cool.
What
You
what
can
have-
talk, Harvey.
Oh,
Far out.
No, we can. Dubai.
Yes.
What have you learned from Dubai? Because
It's the fastest market in the world. It requires a ton of systemization. Onboarding 40 people a month is very different to onboarding 1 person a month. And if you start to build your systems to onboard 40, you'll be able to onboard 1 with ease. So we learn a lot about area knowledge, market knowledge, transactional knowledge, brand knowledge, how you generate a lead, how you win a listing, and how you make a sale. And that needs to be very formulaic. And that would be the first 7 weeks of anyone's real estate career. if I did get the opportunity to work with them inside of your business or another, that I'd teach them each of those things week by week by week as their first 7 weeks. They'll become phenomenal agents.
So, but you're executing a lot from everything else that you've learned there.
Mm-hmm.
It's in your coaching, it's in your teaching.
Mm-hmm.
Like, it does it like sort of depress you how far behind our country is?
Oh no, Australia is very progressive, but like literally there are sections of Australia. Like Australia is not actually, 7 states. We're 7 different countries because you try and train it as a real estate trainer. In Queensland, no quoting. In New South Wales, quoting but no
Very,
price.
very fresh
In
topic.
Victoria, you now have to have a published auction reserve, apparently, next year. The foundational idea is that literally every different environment brings good things. You've got to learn how to go and see the best things in the world and bring that back to your world. And I always just think, how do I make today a win? Because if I can make today a win, see a sunrise, see a sunset, help someone out, leave someone better off than I found them, then I've done my job.
So what do you want to change in the real estate industry in Australia? Like if you could change things, what would you change?
Oh, look, to be honest, I'd probably get everyone to turn social off. Because I don't know how many of your vendors are actually watching it when they sign the agency agreement.
Fair. As in
It's
socials
good.
as in like Instagram and Facebook, or socials as in like amplify
and
and
just turn it off.
turn everything off?
Yep. And I'd say this
For
too.
real estate or in general?
Yep, completely off.
Yeah, wow.
I think that as a society, we should all turn it off. And the reason for that is that literally when you go to look at the research, the systemic damage, the way that Facebook got it in globally, they got it in without any government regulation. And what it's doing to democracies is unbelievable. And I would say this to you, that like you have a bad thought, that bad thought turns into a meme, that meme turns into a direct message, that direct message turns into that then being reinforced. What it's actually doing, and tell me the correlation between that and mental health, it's unbelievable.
But when you look at it, it's social media is more than social media now. It's a place to transact. Like they made it into this one encompassing system where you do everything in life.
But I can show you an agent in Melbourne who does $7 million a year, has no social.
Yeah.
I can also show you an agent in Brisbane who looks like he makes a killing and he's probably lucky to do $100,000 a year. So it's not be all and end all. I just think that like the foundation, obviously we've got to have a healthy relationship with it. That's how we build our networks and how we do our relationships and how we DM and how we connect with people that we've never connected with before. But I think there's far too much emphasis on that. And I love that. The comedian, right? Phenomenal, Steve Martin. He says like everyone, when they want to learn how to be a comedian, they're like, what should I name my show? And like what should my business card look like? And what should my Instagram handle be? And like literally what should be the opening words? But he goes, but no one ever says to me, what does it take to be a great comedian? I think real estate's the same.
Yeah, wow.
So once you've done 50 transactions, then I'll let you have a social account. They're like, so
yeah, that's amazing.
So I'm just like area. So I'm not saying don't, but I'm like, you got to be careful what you believe. And I think this is the foundational idea, is that there's, a guy said to me the other day, be careful of that bloke. I said, why is that? He goes, big hat, no cattle. I was like, what? He goes, big hat, no cattle. I'm like, all show, no go. And I coach a young guy out of Armidale, and he got me the other day. He's a fascinating country kid. He just goes, mate, I'd rather be good than look good. And I just thought, wow, that's super. Because what he's actually saying is that like get the foundations right and then learn how to amplify what makes you phenomenal.
And that's what we talk about, the hierarchy of communications. Because some people value social media higher than text or calls. And I look at them like, how do you...
But they don't understand the laws of influence, face-to-face every day of the week.
Belly to belly, that's what works.
Well, belly to belly is a bit weird, but face-to-face is enough.
You probably can get away with Armidale if you say it.
Yes, yeah, exactly right.
Josh, how do you define success? What does success look like for you?
I think that literally if I'm in a position that every day that there's someone else who can live their life a little bit easier because we've had the chance to come into contact, then that's been a highly successful day.
Yeah. Wow.
And I always think about this, that it's like, I'm not my motorbike, I'm not my brand, I'm not my business, I'm not any of those things. I'm just another human being who's an absolute amateur just trying to have a go in life. And the reality of it is that we all put our jeans on one leg at a time. Actually, some people do the technique where they lay on the bed and put two on. But I'm trying to get you to think that when you realize...
There's a song about that.
Yeah. When you realize that you're just a human, like, mate, just be great to other humans. Make me feel important. I catch the bus quite a bit in Sydney into the CBD, and I always say thanks to the bus driver. If I'm at a cafe or restaurant, I'm always really lovely to the waiter and waitress. I try to lighten up the day. If I'm at a check-in counter, I try to be really lovely to people. I just think that, like, get out of your head and learn to, like, help other people to really enjoy their existence here on earth. And, like, service is the rent that we pay for being here on earth. So just think, you're here to serve others, serve them really well.
That's beautiful.
Harvey, it's so great to be on Call Me Successful.
Well, thanks for finally coming on.
This was super hard to actually get on, so I'm glad that we finally got here.
Look, we've been trying for a while, Josh.
I know, and also too, great to have your incredible friendship, but also to your leadership inside of the industry, and to be able to spend some time with you both personally and in business has been a really great opportunity. So thank you so much for what you do.
Thank you, Josh. And, I know I wouldn't be here without your guidance. So thanks for guiding us and my business and my people. So I really appreciate your time today as well. And guys, if you want to see more Josh, you can get him on Josh Phegan Digital.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Or just go to the website.
Or just go to the website. And he is on social media as well.
Yes. Of course, we're there.
Of course, he's there.
But we've done more than 50 deals.
Right. Yeah, there we go. Thanks, Josh. Thanks for your time.
Thanks so much, Harvey.